Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for episode 1 of The Rachel Lang Show. I am excited to start this week during Pisces season with one of my favorite topics, and that is when art imitates astrology. So many of us who know astrology, who follow the celestial landscape of what's happening in our times, we look at current events, we look at things that are happening in the world, we look at pop culture, and we view it through a lens of astrology. So looking at not just what's happening, but why is it happening and how can we find a deeper meaning to what's taking place in the world. I'm a certified astrologer. So I'm one of those people who, during every awards ceremony or show, or, when a big movie comes out, I have my little phone app I use Time Passages, I use Astro Gold phone apps, and I'm looking to see what is happening in the charts of these actors and performers and musicians. And usually you can see the way that their career is reflecting what's taking place in their chart. One of the best ways to do that is to look at awards season. You can see who's making a big name, who's getting a lot of attention, who's getting overlooked or snubbed. And so that's one of the things that we are going to touch on today in our discussion. I am joined today by the amazing Tisha Morris. Before we get started with our interview, I wanted to give an overview of what's happening astrologically and some of the signatures that you're going to be feeling this week. I think the big overarching theme for this week happens on March 9th. And that is when Mars in Aquarius is in a standoff square aspect to Uranus in Taurus. Now, Mars is the planet of fire. It's passion. It's action. It's that motivating drive and that force that makes us want to get up and go. And Uranus is the planet of sudden change. This is a planet that can relate to impulsivity, where we've had a buildup of energy and it needs some kind of release. So this square brings us really face to face with situations in our lives that just are not working. And we can't sit back and just tolerate things that have been going on for too long. So we might see some sudden shakeups with this particular transit. The other thing that's happening, so the sun is activating both of these points. The sun is in a sextile aspect, which is pretty flowing. It means the energy is relatively open, even though you've got to kind of work a little bit with Uranus. And the sun is also in a semi-sextile, which means right next to, in the sign just adjacent to Mars. So the sun's presence in this aspect relationship shows that we are moving in the direction of our goals. We want to be unstoppable. So this can be somewhat of a challenge, especially for our fixed signs. So if you're a Taurus, a Leo, a Scorpio, or an Aquarius, then you might feel this as a buildup of stagnation that needs some kind of catharsis. And for our earth signs also, so earth signs, you tend to be more on the tangible, practical side of things. And so this can be challenging if you don't quite know the steps to take. This is one of those weeks where there's a lot of energy. You can hear the tone of my voice pretty much describes it. Like we have to make a new path forward for any situation where we have come to a roadblock or we feel stuck. Now, this is all happening during the balsamic moon, so that very last phase of the lunation cycle, when already it's a time of endings. It's a time of cleaning out and making space for some kind of new beginning. And we're doing this spiritually because we're talking about the sign of Pisces. I think there's also going to be a big shift that's taking place in the film industry and in entertainment. And that's because Pisces rules the entertainment industry. And this is happening just the day before the Academy Awards. And the day of the Academy Awards is that new moon. So on a really practical level, you might just need more time and space alone. You might need more of a break, more rest. The other thing that's happening on March 9th is that Mercury is entering Aries. And Mercury is the planet that relates to communication. It's how we express ourselves and what we're thinking about, too. So it can be related to our inner dialogue. And Aries is assertive, it wants to express itself. This particular placement gives us the courage to speak our mind and to speak our mind, even when some of us, if you have any Libra in your chart, thank you, then you might be a little bit more reserved, or you might not want to offend people with what you say. Or, those of us who tend to censor ourselves, this is a time when that filter comes off and we can really be more authentic about how we are expressing ourselves in the world. So we could see more politicians coming out, for example, really speaking out against things that they might have been quiet about in the past. We're going to see a lot of volatility, maybe more fights breaking out on social media, but there's always a movement forward. The energy of Aries is never about conflict just to rock the boat. I think that there's always this sense of wanting, because it's a cardinal sign, wanting to move the conversation forward. And so that's what we're going to see. We're going to see that happen. Now, on March 11th, sweet Venus enters Pisces. And so it really adds a graceful tone. So the 9th, the 10th, there's like this buildup with these influences that are taking place. And then Venus reminds us of what it is to connect with one another, to relate, and to experience pleasure. Venus in Pisces gives us the sense that we can enjoy ourselves. So that influence really tempers some of that buildup of fire or some of that buildup of cathartic energy. The Pisces new moon really brings us into eclipse season. We are really moving toward that March 25th eclipse. So everything starts intensifying throughout the month. And it's really important because intensity can mean that we are all really activated by others' anger, angry words, or others' angry actions. And so we really want to keep that in mind as we engage in any kind of conflict or as we move through our day. It's not the time to yell at the grocery store checkout person, or it's not the time to start a fight with someone behind you in line. But it is a time to, if you've been wanting to say something and you've been holding back, if you're wanting to express your love for somebody and you've been like biting your tongue, now is the time to do it. You've got some extra courage. And Venus in Pisces really gives us the opportunity to speak with poetic words, to use language from our heart. And that can be a real turning point for us in our relationships or in other aspects of our lives. Today's episode is going to be a special treat because we are going to talk about the intersection of astrology and one of the biggest events in pop culture, that is the Academy Awards. Yes, it's award season, and we're days before the great big night where all of the awards are announced and we see our favorite actors and creators going down the red carpet. And here to talk to me about the astrology of this moment and how art imitates astrology is none other than Tisha Morris. Tisha is the founder of Morris Entertainment Law, where she practices entertainment law with a mission to help diverse voices tell their story for a better world. Tisha is originally from Nashville, Tennessee, where she practiced law for over a decade. She obtained a fine arts degree in interior design and has certifications in yoga, feng shui, and life coaching prior to moving to Los Angeles as a self-help author and to pursue a career in the entertainment industry. Tisha is the best-selling author of 5 nonfiction books and has appeared on Netflix's Depp and Heard documentary, ABC's Live with Kelly and Ryan, and has been featured on Hay House Radio, Elle Decor, Well and Good. Tisha's a member of the Beverly Hills Bar Association, California Lawyer for the Arts, LGBTQ plus Lawyers LA, and Women in Film. Tisha lives in Ojai, California with her wife, who happens to be me, our poodle, and Tisha's stepcat, my cat, Nora. Welcome, Tisha. Welcome to our show.
Yay!
Yay!
It's so excited to be here and to be your very first guest, talking about really my two favorite topics, the entertainment industry with the Oscars and astrology. Yeah, the Academy Awards is kind of like my Christmas. Nothing excites me more than putting astrology to it. So I'm excited about today's interview.
I know, I love it too. It's really interesting to me how you can see the trends, the astrological trends in the types of movies that come out, who's nominated for awards. And so we're going to get right into it. But first, before we talk about the awards, this is a very big moment in the astrology of right now. We've got, Pluto just entered Aquarius. And so there's a great big change that happens whenever outer planets move into new signs. And so there's a change, a shift in consciousness that's happening. And how do you see that reflected in who's nominated and what's happening in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many moving parts that took place in 2023 when these movies were put out for viewing. And most importantly, the strikes were happening, which is a very Aquarius, Capricorn-ish type of event to take place. And so these movies were all made before the strikes, and then they were released kind of when Pluto was going back and forth from Pluto to Aquarius and back and forth. And then now we are in award season when Pluto is in Aquarius. When we look at the Oscar noms and look at the astrology, we're looking at it for when the film came out or on Oscar date, which is March 11th coming up.
Yeah, that's a great question. I look at it both. I look at the release date as the birth date of the film. And we're going to, in a few minutes, we're going to take the release date and layer on top of that the date for March 10th. So the awards date. And so we'll be able to see what kinds of, just like we would look at a birth chart, we're going to be able to see what kinds of transits are taking place that are opening up possibilities and what kinds of transits indicate that someone might be overlooked.
That could explain why there was some big blockbusters, hint, hint, Barbie, that didn't quite make the Oscar cut because we were in the summer of Leo, and Leo, there's a lot of love in the air. And then the year of the woman, we had the Taylor Swift touring, breaking records on tour, and same with Beyonce. We had Barbie. It was like the summer of love and women. And now we come to Oscar season, and it seems to be a lot about war.
So I want to backtrack just a little bit and talk about the astrology of what was happening this summer. And then we'll talk about that as it relates to all the blow up of these war themes that are playing out right now, not just in Hollywood, but all over the world. You're quite astute. I can tell you love your astrology. And so Barbie was released. The release date was July 21st, 2023. And right at that time, in fact, I'm going to show the chart for that date. Here is the chart for Barbie's release date. If you're watching this on video, you're able to see it. But in case you're not, I'll go ahead and describe what's taking place here. So the release date for Barbie was July 21st, 2023. And I just erected a chart, like an Aries, a 0 degrees Aries natural chart for this. So we won't have the placement of the moon, for example, and we won't have the placement of the ascendant. But we can see the lineup of the major planets. And one of the big things that I wanted to point out here is that July 21st, Pluto is in Capricorn. So it dipped into Aquarius in the spring between March 23rd and June 11th. And so we saw a little preview of what's to come over this new 20-year cycle. But Barbie and Oppenheimer were both released during Pluto's move back into Capricorn. In fact, most of the other films were. And so we see it's almost like we have business to clean up One thing that you just mentioned that I want to point out, because this is a theme that we see not just in Barbie's release date, but also in Oppenheimer's release date, is this real tension. Pluto and Capricorn, which is a lot about the patriarchy and governments, like the military institutions, and Cancer, which is where the sun was during the release date of both of those, which is
On the
about the
solstice, nonetheless.
yes, exactly, which is about the archetypal mother. And this is one of the talking points that we've heard and one of the themes that we've seen in who got nominated and who got overlooked. So, can you talk a little bit about just that, the Capricorn Cancer axis line, the male and female war versus independent, female energy? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I do know a thing or two about it. I have a Cancer sun, Capricorn ascendant, so they are always at tug of war in my chart of the mother and father, and or the masculine and feminine, I guess is probably the better way of saying it. I mean, I wonder what their children were, perhaps the holdovers. I don't know, poor things. But they kind of made them like a couple of the summer. And meanwhile, there was also the tug of war with the North and South node of Aries and Libra, which you can, explain more about that. That was going on at the same, or is still going on at the same time.
Yeah. Let me back up for everybody for just a second. The North Node is an invisible point that relates to the lineup of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And the North Node kind of represents our collective destiny, where we pay attention, where we focus on. And the North Node has been in the sign of Aries since July of 2023. Now, Aries is the sign of war. And typically, if you go back and you look at previous times when the North Node was in Aries, in the early 2000s, for example, you see war being a big theme in the Academy Awards, in the movies that hit the top of the charts, made the box office hits. For example, The War of the World, the Star Wars. And so you tend to see war being a prominent focus. But Libra is the opposite point, and that relates to peace. It relates to relationships. And so how do you think that plays out, or how have you seen that play out in the industry this year?
To me, the Barbie is like the ultimate Libra Aries movie. But funny enough, Barbie was kind of playing the Aries role, and Ken was playing the Libra role, which is kind of a upside down world from what we typically think of those stereotypes being. Usually it's the woman pining for the love of the man. And here we had the opposite. So in here, Barbie kind of wanting to go be Aries and kind of have her independent path. I think this is why it went, this one of the many reasons this movie went over so well with female audiences, of showing this independent woman, the Aries energy. And for a change, seeing the man, Ken, like really wanting a relationship and this like really soft side of the guy. So I think that was a big reason everyone really appreciated it. Not everyone, but the Academy did not. So let's talk about the really huge snub of Greta Gerwig and not getting nominated for directing. In my opinion, I mean, the world she created, the people she directed, the writer, and she was the writer as well. It's such an incredible feat she pulled off, not to mention being able to get the messaging across, and selling the studio on it was incredible. And obviously the sales showed that. And so for her not to get nominated, she, by the way, got nominated and for Lady Bird. I think it was like 10 years ago. What are your thoughts on the Greta Gerwig snub?
I think it's such a statement about what we as a culture prioritize. Like you said, this film created a whole world. And it was the film that brought people to the theaters after COVID, after, people had a real fear of going out and being in that confined space. And it was creative. It was funny. I've heard a lot of people say that Barbie is not the typical Academy Award winning film. Typically, it's the drama. Typically, it is the war film. It is something that pulls at your heartstrings in a cathartic way. But I felt like Barbie did that in a different way. I was disappointed. I'm going to be honest, because I think it really gave us an opportunity to look at new metaphors and to open up our ideas of what is fine art. Who's to say that a big, creative, fantastical world like that isn't fine art?
I mean, it got nominated for Best Picture, so at least got that acknowledgement. And then, so it's just strange that she wouldn't get nominated for Best Director. and also Margot Robbie. And ironically, it was Ken, her shadow, that got nominated. And of course, America Ferrera, too, who wasn't in the Barbie world. So there was just a lot of irony
Right.
in the nominations.
Yeah. And what's unfortunate, I think, is that this was a year where we saw some milestones being made. For example, Lily Gladstone was nominated, speaking in an Indigenous role, speaking a native language. That is a big milestone. We have more diversity in general this year. I think America Ferrera being nominated for Best Supporting Actress is incredible, a Latina performer, artist. And so you see a lot of like groundbreaking in so many different ways. At the same time, we're still celebrating war movies.
Yes.
And sometimes that just like tugs at me, you know? Like,
Right.
why are we still reifying these movies about war and violence at a time in our culture when there's so much war and violence? Is there a relationship? I don't know. What do you think?
Art imitates life, and it imitates the astrology that we're in, Aries being the North Node, where all the focus is. And nuclear weapons are so much in the zeitgeist right now. And that movie was about the making of the atomic bomb. So it's all just really on point and a little disturbing at the same time, quite frankly.
Right. And I want to say, too, I thought the film was beautifully filmed. I thought it was a compelling story. I thought it showed an aspect of war that you don't often see. And it makes sense astrologically, too, because Pluto is the planet that relates to nuclear energy and nuclear war in particular. Pluto was discovered around the time of the atomic bomb. And so here we have a brand new Pluto cycle starting in the sign of Aquarius, which relates to alternative energy sources, which relates to things that are blown up in the air. And so on an purely astrological level, I think Oppenheimer, this is its moment. I think it's got a lot of energy behind it.
Can both agree it's going to take Best Picture. It's won all the other awards so far. I think if I had a big chunk of money, I would definitely put my bet on it.
Yeah. Let's talk about, the anatomy of a fall.
I've yet to have anyone convince me of its nominations in the way that it has been nominated. I enjoyed the film, but I'm open to other opinions.
Well, I think here is a really good example of divine timing. Anatomy of the Fall came out during an Earth grand trine between Uranus, Pluto, and Mars. And for those of you who are new to astrology, grand trines are like a free flow of energy. If you want to manifest something, you look for a chart with a grand trine. There's not a lot of resistance, there's not a lot of holding back. And it's interesting too, because we have Mars opposite Neptune in that transit, which is so much about what is the truth and what's beneath the surface and, who's lying and who's telling the truth. And that's what the whole film was about. But I look at this chart for that film and I think, oh, wow, this has a lucky birth date. It's a lucky day.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Now, funny enough, where it didn't get lucky, however, is that it didn't get nominated for foreign film. So the way foreign films get nominated, it's each country submits their film of the year, so to speak. And this was a French film. They bypassed it for another film that premiered at Cannes, and I can't remember the name of it. I actually didn't even make the cut for the, 5 or 6 films that are nominated for the Oscars. And so France did not put Night of the Fall up. I guess they're kind of surprised themselves of how well it's done. A lot of people are saying, well, a woman did get nominated for directing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not like they're, have something against women. And yet, I'm going to take the argument of, I don't know, I think it's a message of women stay in your lane. We applaud you when you do drama, kind of like Lady Bird type films. I will say Night of the Fall was a little bit of a stretch for a female since it did involve alleged murder. But I don't know, to me, it's a stay in your lane message. I'm willing to be wrong about that as well.
That's interesting. I want to hear a little bit more about women stay in your lane. Guide me through that.
Well, I'm trying to come up with a scenario or a justification for Anatomy of Fall's directing to get nominated over Barbie's directing. A cabin, house, and then you had a courtroom, and you had no big, huge stars. There's a myth that around Hollywood of like the reason why you need male directors is to handle the big egos. for a big film. And, Chris Nolan's that perfect guy of handling the big egos of Robert Downey Jr. and all those guys. And there's a myth that women can't really do that. So I'm looking at Nadia Fall. You didn't have any big egos as far as what we think of that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Greta had a whole like a whole star-studded cast. She had dancing. She had in Barbie world, out of Barbie world. I mean, there's just a lot there she had on her plate to direct compared to Nadia Fall. And I would just love to hear someone's explanation of why that got the nomination and not Greta Gerwig. Maybe it's just the luck of the stars, right? So you've looked at some of the nominees charts, I imagine. Mm-hmm. Have you so far seen like a pattern of those who've gotten nominated in their charts looking really stellar?
Absolutely. So let me describe what makes a stellar looking chart. First of all, it's not always the big trines and sextiles for those who follow astrology. It's not always, the great big Jupiter transit. Sometimes, and this was true, we saw with Will Smith's win several years ago, sometimes it's an opposition.
Well, clearly, is that the year he punched?
Yeah. Yes. Where it's like you've hit your upper limit and, things could go downhill from here. But this year, what's really interesting is that we do have a lot of the winners reflect some of the overarching themes that are playing out right now. And the themes that we're talking about, Pluto is very much a big player in a lot of the nominees. Also, we have Uranus transits, which Uranus can be the planet that brings about sudden, unexpected change and like life takes a turn. And we definitely see that in play in charts. For example, I want to talk about Lily Gladstone's chart for sure.
Yeah, well, I do. What's going on with her?
Lily Gladstone's chart, this is a breakthrough moment for her. First of all, it's her nodal return. Killers of the Flower Moon came out when the North Node was right back at the same place it was at the time of her birth. This is a transit that happens every 18 and a half years. And it is one of those destined moments where everything opens up for you to seize your destiny and to really live in purpose. And so here we see in her chart the complete manifestation of this. This is really what cool. She was born to do. Yeah, it's awesome. And she has a Leo sun. We don't have her time of birth. So there are some factors that we don't know here, but we can see just a real opening. And the next few years, and also, so Lily has had the same Pluto transit that people with Cancer placements have had since 2008, which is you're working hard. Tisha, I think you can speak to this being a Cancer representative. How was your Pluto transit? And for those of you who don't know, Pluto entered Cancer in 2008 and
Capricorn.
Capricorn, I'm sorry, the opposite sign of Cancer.
Cancer.
And thank you for correcting me. And Pluto, it's been in that sign. And even if you have planets at different placements and it's not exactly on that opposition with your sun or one of your chart points, you're feeling under the cloud of Pluto. So talk to us a little bit about what it's been like as a Cancer.
Well, it's been in our first house of identity, opposing our seventh house. I always get my sun and my ascendant because they're opposite. So because it's Cancer and Capricorn. Wherever Pluto is, there's like a focus and at times an obsession of that area of your life. And so identity has been for Capricorns, seventh house for Cancers, identity and relationships. And so since 2008, I mean, those themes have just been through a blender on all of them. And so I've started out as an attorney, a bankruptcy attorney, went through 12 years of being a feng shui expert, and went back into law now as an entertainment attorney. And so now Pluto has spit me out as an entertainment attorney after all of that. And here I am on your podcast with my wife, who was my prize at the end of the transit as well.
Exactly. And so the journey that you're talking about with your identity and your sense of self, Lily has been going through that with her mindset. So her Mercury, which is at 25 degrees Cancer, her moon, since we don't have her time of birth, we don't know exactly where her moon is, but it's likely that her moon's in Cancer. And so you have a lot of that kind of stretching, pulling, that sort of influence of uncomfortable growth represented in her chart. And I have to say that one of the challenges that she's had over the last year and a half is Neptune opposite her Venus, which is changing the nature of her relationships. And so when I look at this, first of all, I think she's got a strong chance of taking home the Academy Award.
I think Emma Stone's the only thing in her way.
Yep.
Have you looked at Emma Stone's chart?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Lily's going to take it, but it's hard to pass up Emma Stone. Haven't seen her performance, so I can't speak about the actual performances as well as canon of the astrology.
So I'm just showing on my screen Emma Stone's chart. It's a DD rating, which means there's some mixed information about what time she was born. We don't want to really factor in the time, but this is any of the charts that I'm working with. I just want to say too that you can find them on astro.com or astrotheme.com. There is a great database of charts available for just about any public figure that you would inquire about. So here is what I want to say about Emma's chart. First of all, when we have eclipses that activate points in our natal chart, meaning the eclipse is happening right on top of one of our sun, our moon, our rising, our Mercury, our Venus, our Mars, that can be one of these lucky moments or one of these life-changing moments. And that March 25th eclipse is happening right next to her moon and Jupiter, and it's activating her Mars. That eclipse is at 5 degrees Libra. The moon's at 5 degrees Libra. The sun's at 5 degrees and some change Aries. And it is signaling points in her chart that relate to success, that relate to attention, and Mars, which is contest winning. So I think you're right about her having a really solid chance of winning this. I mean, the astrology just points to some good lucky factors. The one thing I would say that's I don't know, is that the planet Jupiter, which is the planet that relates to luck, it relates to opportunities. Jupiter is opposite her sun that night. And when Jupiter is in an opposition, sometimes you can have something that you think is yours and it gets taken out from underneath you. Like, oh man, I really thought that was going to be mine. Now, Lily has it squaring her sun. So both of them might come away with, even if they're winning, taking home the award, they might be coming away with like feeling bad or having some bad press or something like that.
Well, can't that also, the Jupiter Sun transit, be feeling of overwhelm?
Absolutely. Great point. Yes. Yeah.
And the opposition to me is a stronger overwhelm than the square, which is more of an internal.
Absolutely. Yeah. You make a really.
I'm kind of now based on the astrology thinking Emma Stone could take it. And if any of the voters have watched The Curse, her series on
I know.
Might be biased toward Emma Stone. That show, by the way, just as a segue, if it didn't get a lot of attention, it is a quirky, clever series. If you're Emma Stone fan, check it out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, I want to show a couple of others so that, being a Libra, I like to be fair. So I have Carrie Mulligan's chart. I have Sandra Hüller's chart from Anatomy of the Fall. And I also have Annette Bening's chart. Are there any charts that you would like to talk about or like to look at of the other leading actresses?
Unfortunately, I don't think any of them have a chance. I think it's between Emma and Lily. But as far as my interests, let's look at Sandra Hüller's Anatomy of the Fall, since we've already talked about my perplexed.
Yes.
That film.
So Sandra, her birthday is April 30th, 1978. And we don't have her time of birth either. If anybody has her time of birth, please let me know. You can find me at therachelangshow.com. I would love to see that. She has a Taurus sun, and Jupiter has been moving over her sun all year long. So there's the opportunity, there's the luck, but it's past. It's not applying to anything else in her chart right now. I mean, it's already done all of the goodness that it came here to do.
I think that it kind of sums up the film as well, because since the timing of the film releases are very influential, and that film came out pretty early. Meanwhile, American Fiction has gotten a lot, because it was like a late releaser, only at the theaters. It's gotten a lot of new buzz. that kind of has, I feel like, taken over the Anatomy of the Falls run that it had. So I feel like what you just said about Sandra Hüller would be true for the film itself, which makes sense. She's the star of the movie.
Right. And I will say about her chart, so Jupiter loves to bring all the good things and the success and the abundance and all of those. Jupiter can, like you said, it can also be overwhelmed, but Jupiter allows you to plant seeds. And we can see with her Venus in Gemini, our air signs are keyed up for some big years ahead. And in particular, Gemini. 2020 in May, Jupiter enters Gemini, and then Uranus enters Gemini in next year. And so these accolades for this film are going to catapult her career. And I could just see things taking off for her. So she might not take home the Oscar, but she's taking,
to be nominated.
yeah, exactly. She's going to take home something even greater. I just want to look at Annette Bening real quickly so we don't leave anybody out, because she is a Gemini. And so the same thing applies to her. Annette, we don't have her time of birth either, but Annette Bening has a few really strong transits happening right now. And in particular, having that Gemini sun, having Gemini Vesta as well. So Vesta is a little asteroid that relates to our sense of being in service. And so when Jupiter enters Gemini and then Uranus enters Gemini, she is just getting ready to have new insights with her career, maybe a new creative medium, a new way of expressing herself. One other thing I wanted to talk about. So Annette Bening's chart has her Venus at 27 degrees Aries, which has also been a point that Pluto has been moving over in a square aspect, in a challenging aspect. And so I think she can't get away from that transit for this awards show.
That was probably the filming of the movie. I mean, the amount of distress she had to go through to film that movie would characterize that transit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll just show Carey Mulligan's chart because I want to be fair. And we don't have her birth time either. She's a Gemini sun, actually a day before, not the same year, but a day before Annette Bening. And think about how much she's been in this year as these transits have activated different points in her chart. At the same time, when I look at this, I don't see a really strong winning chart for this year. But I think in a few years, when Uranus gets into Gemini and Pluto gets a little further into Aquarius, like 2007, 2008, then we're going to see some amazing things coming from her. So we just talked about the leading actresses, the best actress category, but let's talk about the best supporting actress category, because when we were talking earlier about this, you had some really interesting insights to say. So first of all, what do you think about the category in general and who got nominated?
Well, I think it's the biggest question mark of the night for me. I think we both agree on the leading actor. We just talked about the leading actress. That's going to be between Emma and Lily. But with the supporting, this is where we're kind of bringing in the Barbie conversation again. America Ferrera getting nominated over Margot Robbie in the actress category because of the snubs of Barbie. I feel like America, it could be her night. I mean, we're not taking anything away from her role by any means. She was fabulous, as was everyone in that movie, but she might get the benefit of the snubs. That being said, Divine Joy Randolph and the Holdovers, she was awesome as well. And to me, it's between those two. And right now, I can't figure out which one's going to get it. So maybe the astrology can help us.
Okay. Well, I agree with that. Everyone who was nominated in that category, Danielle Brooks, Jodie Foster. Oh my gosh. First of all, it's so great to see Jodie Foster back in action. I have to say, as a little lesbian back in the day, I think every little lesbian, who grew up and came out in the 90s had a Jodie Foster thing. But, seeing her back, it's like all is right with the world. So I want to look at her chart as well. But I agree with you. America Ferrera was brilliant in that role. And I really think it's like a turning point for her in her career. She's so accomplished and so talented and so gracious in all of her interviews. And she's done so much to raise Latinx voices. And so I've loved that she's getting accolades this year and that she's really been celebrated. So let's start with her chart. And again, anyone can find these charts on astro.com or astrotheme.com. First of all, I just have to say, I am geeking out about her chart because there is so much here that points to that life-changing moment like an Academy Award win would be. And the first thing that I wanted to point out is we talked about Pluto's influence. We talked about that a lot. Her sun is at 28 degrees Aries, and Pluto has been moving, challenging it for about a year and a half in a square aspect. What do you think that suggests for a potential win for her?
Well, all of Pluto makes us stronger after it breaks us down. But with the square, it's been a more of an internal transformation for her. I think she's kind of gone in and done the work internally. I don't know. Does Pluto give you gifts at the end? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, it gives you gifts as an influence and power.
Okay. Yes. All right. Yeah. There you go. I mean, the thing that initially strikes me is she's an Aries, and hello, it's an Aries year.
Right.
North Node. So that automatically bumps her up into some astrology points.
I know. I mean, and look at this. The North Node is at 15 degrees on Academy Awards night on March 10th. It's at 15 degrees Aries. It is going to be going over her Venus, her Ceres. It's on her Eris, almost exact. And Eris is this little asteroid, this little dwarf planet that is named after the goddess of discord. And Eris is really prominent in the charts of feminist icons and leaders and people who really take a stand for something.
That's kind of the role she played in the movie. Was
exactly
kind of the role of Eris. I mean, she was the feminine voice in that movie. So in a way, she kind of played the Eris role, don't you think?
You know what? You're so right. And it's actually the role of Eris conjunct Venus, which is I'm going to make a stand in a really graceful way that brings people together.
Yeah.
And that's what she did. And so here we have the eclipses on March 25th and April 8th are both activating that point. And one of the things about eclipses in forecasting work is that they're wild cards. So you never know if the influence of it is going to strike before or after. But usually when an eclipse activates a personal point in our chart, it's a date with destiny. One other thing, too, I wanted to talk about. So her 10th house or midheaven, which is the point that we look at for success and for recognition, that is a point that is being really strongly activated by Pluto. And her Pluto natally is right on that point, showing that she was born to be someone of influence, to be someone of note. So Pluto is challenging her in just the right ways to say, all right, are you ready to step into your role? If we look at the ruler of Scorpio, which is the ruler of her 10th house, we find Mars and we find Pluto. And transiting Pluto is moving back and forth over her Mars and over her Pluto, both last year and this year and next year. So there is a real awakening of her talent, of her voice. We are going to see a lot of her over the coming years. But is she going to win, Tisha?
So I was going to ask, like, when you look at this chart, we all are moved in some way or up-leveled by wins, but we can also be moved and have that extra fire from losing something that feels like, man, we had it or whatever, is so close and propels you to have to work that much harder for the next project or whatever. Can you see anything that would indicate which of those directions this could take?
Yeah, it's a great question.
I guess either way, she has success for sure in her future. Right. And I'm wondering, is it going to come from a win or going to come from a loss? Either way, she's going to be awesome.
The voting is all happening while transiting Jupiter is in a really favorable, lovely trine aspect to her natal Jupiter and her ascendant. So people are looking at her, they're watching her at all the other awards shows. They're saying, oh my gosh, look at that amazing speech at the Critics' Choice Awards.
Yep,
and look amazing at how gorgeous she is at the SAG Awards. So leading up to the whole voting period, she's got Jupiter shining so brightly on her. I think it's a win. Then after the awards, Jupiter's opposing her Saturn, and she's like, now I have the responsibility of being a winner. And, the next project's coming in.
Okay. So let's compare that with Divine Joy Randolph. Her role, for those who haven't seen The Holdovers, it was a great movie. Highly recommend it. Cillian Murphy is going to take Best Actor because of the whole war thing we'd already discussed. I think Paul Giamatti is a close second. Anyway, all that to say, The Holdovers is a great movie. Really loved that kind of the throwback to the days when things seemed easier.
Yeah, yeah. So here are some things I love about Divine Joy Randolph's chart. First of all, what a powerhouse. I mean, just an incredible actor. And like you said before, this category I think is going to be the hardest. So we don't have her time of birth either, but her birthday is May 21st, 1986. And here is the thing about any of our cuspers, but in particular our air sign cuspers. Pluto is making a very nice, lovely trine aspect to her sun. Now it's already passed. So it's what we call separating. So it's some of the energy is moving away from her. It's going to be moving back later this year in November, but in September and November. But for right now, Pluto has let up a little bit. It's kind of moving past it. A couple of things that stand out to me about her chart are, one, she does have some really nice Jupiter transits, and Jupiter can signify a winning chart, a winning aspect. But nothing is really perfecting at this time. We might have a near miss with her. And again, we don't have her birth time.
Yeah, because if we had her birth time, that would give us a very specific moon and maybe even I mean, would you not to get too in the weeds with astrology, but if we look at because this is what, like with sports, of like whether a particular sports Travis Kelce is going to have a big game or not, you could look at things for his chart that day, and I would think you would kind of look at what the moon, Mercury are doing to see in like that moment if they're having or that day if they're having a really.
Yes, that's such a great point. The moon, the transiting moon, can be an activator of potential. And
in this case, couldn't Mercury be as well? Because it's like the messenger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, one interesting thing about the night of the Academy Awards is the moon is moving out of Pisces. And over the course of that evening, the moon is going to be moving into Aries. So I think we could probably start the evening really in one tone. And then by the end of the evening, we're talking about Oppenheimer, we're talking about war. People's speeches are going to get a little fiery. We're probably going to be hearing some speeches about Gaza and Israel and Palestine.
I hope we do, honestly, because I feel like the Oppenheimer team has lost some opportunities to make some really moving speeches. And I'm not saying one way or another. I think everyone wants peace on some level, but like just some kind of movie about nuclear weapons at a time when everything seems precarious. I feel like they're missing some good opportunities. So maybe they're saving it for the big night.
I agree with you, Tisha. I'm so glad you said that, because every time I hear any of them receiving the award, I think, we are receiving breaking news that Russia has nuclear weapons in space, or that they have a whole space military program for nuclear weapons. There's the capacity to really destroy the world. And so we're dealing with the same themes now that we were then. And it's not as far away as we would like to believe.
Yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, that's really interesting about the moon changing, because it starts out in Pisces, which rules the screen in movies. And so that's kind of cool. So we probably start out with like a real Hollywood glamour night. And then, like you said, we're going to end with the best picture.
Exactly.
We'll have to see before the show of what order they're going to announce the winners in, because that could make a difference with, I don't know, maybe it could make a difference whether America, if the award is usually the supporting, they do those early. I wonder if she's during Pisces moon or later with the Aries moon.
Yeah, she will probably be the Pisces moon. It moves into Aries just about an hour and a half in. So if the awards start at 5, it's going to be moving. Oh, actually, not even an hour in. It's actually like 10 minutes in. And hang on one second. Let me get the exact time. Let the moon moves into.
Because America being an Aries, I mean, it sounds like I'm being so literal, but as you know, I mean, I think astrology can be so freaking literal.
Yep. And this is what's so great about all these astrological calendars we have right now. So the moon moves into Aries at 5:19 p.m. So you're
Pacific.
right. The red carpet and the opening monologue are one thing, and then the next. Going back to Divine Joy for just a moment. So, one thing that might tip the scales in her favor is that the transiting sun is at 20 degrees Pisces that night, and her natal Jupiter is at 18 degrees Pisces. So they're about 2 degrees away. Now, every year when the sun is moving over your Jupiter, that's the luckiest time of year for you. And so we have that happening during the voting. That is one aspect that I think really puts her in a good position. And
Yeah.
she's also in her nodal return. So her
Mm.
North Node is in Aries. Her nodal return would have happened actually when the film came out, but all year long, she's in that date with Destiny. So I think it really is going to be so close
Yeah.
between the two of
Yeah.
them. They both have great astrology.
And
I
both are going to do amazing things regardless of what
absolutely.
happens.
Yeah. Are there any other charts that you wanted to look at for best supporting?
Do you have Danielle Brooks by
I
chance? Or
do. Yes. She's so wonderful. I love Danielle Brooks. I have not seen The Color Purple yet, but I think she's such a fantastic actress and she just has such a great presence. We don't have her time of birth. One thing, so Danielle, this is a big year for Danielle. Her birthday is on September 17th, 1989, and there's an eclipse happening on September 17th of this year, September 17th and October 2nd, and it activates her Sun Mars conjunction. Even though my intuitive feeling is that it's going to go to one of the others that we talked about, I don't know. This could be a surprise upset or something like that.
yeah, you never know. I mean, there's always one big surprise, I feel like, at every year.
The one thing that I would say is to her not receiving it is Neptune. So Neptune is opposing her Sun and her Mars. And this is something that's been going on. And this is something that's going to continue to go on for the next year with her Mars. I think that even though there's a lot of nice light shining on her, I think Neptune is not one of those transits that when it's in an opposition where you are taking home glory, it is like, what am I missing? Why did I not see this coming? And so an opposition can be really tough, and especially if it's Mars, which is the point in our chart that relates to us winning.
Yeah, she's going to have a lot of energy for that next project.
Yes, yes, exactly. Should we look at Jodie Foster just because we are looking at Jodie Foster?
Because you have a crush.
I know I don't have her, not anymore, but I mean,
Are you jealous?
no, 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 you don't need to be jealous. So Jodie Foster is November 19th. We do have her birth time, and so we have an accurate chart for her. And one thing I wanted to point out about Jodie Foster's chart is that, first of all, Pluto is right on top of her south node this year and next year. And she is just really doing a lot of growth, uncomfortable growth, stretching in new directions. This is a very big time for her.
Pluto in the South Node does not sound like a winning chart.
It's a tough one. I'm not going to lie.
It's a growth moment.
Yeah, it is. And also, Jupiter is opposing her Neptune, and Jupiter in Taurus is opposing her Scorpio planets. Here we have a lot of the hope of something that doesn't quite materialize.
Well, also, so Neptune has been doing what? Say that again, Neptune.
So Jupiter is opposing her natal Neptune.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and has that been going on for the last year or so?
Nope,
Or
it
no?
just started. This just started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna like make a correlation of like because the whole movie was
yes,
she had to be in the water.
Water. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Like a lot of water.
A lot of water. Well,
Yeah.
transiting Neptune was in a trine aspect, a lovely flowing trine aspect to her sun. So
Okay,
there you go. And there's her entrance back into performing
Yep.
and into, I mean, I know she has never really quite left, but having a visible presence again, that's, Neptune is the planet that relates to the film industry, and Pisces is the film industry. And so here we have awakening back into it through a movie about swimming.
I thought her and Annette Bening just were masterful, and I would love to give them both the Oscars. They did so well that they're the kind of actresses that they make it look effortless, and so it doesn't look like they had to work hard because they're that good, and so they don't get the acknowledgments like they probably should.
I would agree with that. And Annette Bening, oh my gosh, just the way that she transformed herself for that character. One thing we haven't brought in our talk about these nominees is Saturn. I've seen Saturn transits that correspond to someone's win and to someone really
Really?
stepping up
Oh,
their game. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Like the
Um, yep.
concretizing of like the work, all the work finally coming into a medal trophy.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But when Saturn is in a challenging configuration, sometimes it shows that there is a loss. And Jody has Saturn transiting Saturn almost exactly opposite her Pluto that night, which I think could be tough.
She's been in Alaska all
Mm.
I don't know when that was filmed, but like just being in Alaska, there's like some Pluto and Saturn involved in that. Like I'm talking about her role in True Detective.
Which
And
she's brilliant in, by the way.
yeah, I mean, I imagine that was a tough, it's not like you're filming in Tahiti on the beach or anything. And she's gotten kind of mixed reviews on it in the show. Well, not really her, but the show itself is kind of, it hasn't been a slam dunk. So yeah, I think that transit is probably a True Detective transit.
Yeah, yeah. And Saturn opposite Pluto can sometimes feel like you're missing something or something's being taken away from you or you're having to hold back. And a lot of times that manifests financially. Sometimes it manifests just in not being able to do what you want to do or having to readjust your priorities. So I think that's going to be a challenging cloud that hangs over her for that evening.
And I'm sure it's part of her story with, there's definitely she's got a lot going on.
Yeah. And her South Node's in Aquarius, which is opposite yours. The South Node in Aquarius can be an acquiescing to the group or to other people and almost like a resistance to really stepping into the spotlight and claiming it. She might go through a whole lot of emotions about, well, I'm not being supported by the academy. And that's
She
all
might
South
not show
Node
up.
stuff. Yep, she might not. Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's all South Node stuff. But on the other side of that transit is really a definition of purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on. Let's talk about our leading men. Now, they're not as much fun as the leading ladies, but we have some interesting ones this year. And is there any chart that you want to look at or anyone that you wanted to talk about
I mean,
first?
it's such a slam dunk that
Yeah.
I don't even need the astrology.
Oh, but it's so fun. We have to
I
look at the
know.
astrology because it's so good.
Tell you why Cillian Murphy will win it.
Yes.
If I were a voting member, I actually would probably vote for Paul Giamatti. I liked Cillian Murphy's performance, don't get me wrong, but honestly, I think the cinematographer of that film really helped Cillian out a lot. The way the camera was able to capture his beautiful blue eyes and the way he would gaze into the sky it was such a beautifully filmed film. I think it would be interesting for another time when we're doing compatibility in business to look at the cinematographer and Cillian Murphy's compatibility chart because I think the cinematographer really has helped him out in this. Paul Giamatti's role was just like true acting, and it's just the quintessential actor being an actor, and really carrying the whole film and quirky character. Bradley Cooper, my gosh, I mean, he has not got enough credit. I feel bad for the guy. He's not going to win again. And it was a fabulous performance. I think maybe makeup and wardrobe were separate categories. But makeup person who I did actually see speak in an event in Santa Barbara recently. I really feel bad for the guy because it was an amazing performance.
First of all, I agree with you about Paul Giamatti. And I love your point about the cinematography for Oppenheimer and the way that Cillian's eyes were captured. I haven't heard anybody else say that. I think you're right. The angles that he was shot at and just all of that. There was so much artistry in that aspect of the film. So Paul Giamatti, they're both Geminis. So this, and then as we said, this is the year for Gemini.
It's a lot of Gemini.
I know. So let's start with Paul, and I'm going to show the chart. And so Paul is a June 6th Gemini. The transiting North Node is opposite his Mars. And Mars is that contest winning, that champion aspect in our chart. The eclipses this year are the one on April 8th is going to be really close to his Mars. His Mars opposes Saturn in Aries in his natal chart. He's fired up. This is a really interesting time. One challenging thing I think for him is that his Venus is right there at 29 degrees Cancer, Pluto's going to be moving back and forth over that. So he is not out of the throes of Pluto. And Pluto aspecting Venus can really be like feeling like, does anybody like me? Yeah. Is there anything you want to add about
The role he played too.
He has Neptune moving over his Chiron that night. The moon is going to be over his Chiron. So there's transformational energy that isn't really suggestive of taking home that prize.
Not a winning chart.
Not a winning chart. And just wait until Jupiter enters Gemini next year. Let's go back to Cillian Murphy's chart, because I do think this is a winning chart. I think there's a lot here. He's got his Jupiter return happening almost like just days after the Academy Awards. So Jupiter being the planet of luck, being the planet of expansion, being the planet of opportunities, and kind of overwhelm, as you said. It's like, oh my gosh, too big, too much, too fast. And his Jupiter's at 14 degrees Taurus, just really being activated by this opportunity right now. He's born as an early degree Gemini. Jupiter is going to be moving over his entire stellium of Taurus planets over the next several months. And it ends up on his sun. So he's taking off.
Yeah, his chart in Oppenheimer, I could not be more sure of the wins. And it's going to be late in the night, good Aries moon. It's, if I were a betting Oscar person, or in your pool, if you're anywhere, you're doing pools at your party, like betting pools. Perhaps our broadcast will help you take home the winning pot.
Absolutely. And Neptune is in a sextile aspect with his Mercury and his Venus, and it is a really sizable moment in his life. Let's look at Bradley Cooper just for fun, and some of these others.
You're going to see a Saturn square somewhere, I bet.
I know. So Bradley Cooper, he's a Capricorn. There's some questions about his birth time. Bradley is January 5th Capricorn. Now, he has lovely Jupiter transit. Jupiter is in a trine aspect to his Capricorn sun. Trine is not as strong as a conjunction. And so it's not as much of a knockout of the park, a ballpark, but there's some nice things happening in his chart. We have Saturn square Neptune, and Saturn is at the bending of the nodes. So it's at that 90-degree point between his north and south nodes. That can be, one of those really trying periods in life. And at the same time, it's like he might not expect to win, because Saturn can kind of put a damper on things. Like, it's kind of the Debbie Downer.
I won't be going to any after parties.
Venus would argue. Venus would say, yeah, he's going to those after parties. But yeah, his Pluto's been moving back and forth over his Venus. He's been through a lot this year.
I mean, the makeup alone.
Yes, correct.
Well, now that Pluto's out of Capricorn, this won't be his first loss. He got looked over for the playbook. Anyway, that was there. I mean, with him being a Capricorn and Pluto being all over his identity, his best Oscar days are coming.
I would agree with that. One other one I wanted to bring up was Jeffrey Wright, who is nominated for American Fiction. And we don't have his birth time either, but he has some really interesting things happening in his chart. And in particular, his Venus, which relates to popularity, relates to people, love and connection, heart connection, and creativity, and how we manifest our creativity. Pluto is right on his Venus, and it's moving back and forth over his Venus. That is a really strong point that's giving him some good attention right now. And that indicates that this is a really prolific time for him. I think that we could see next year some of the work that he's been cultivating. I think it's going to come out in a way that is really exciting. And he's also in his Saturn return, which is one of those turning point transits where someone takes the reins of their life and really steps up to the plate. So his Saturn return could actually be a tipping point for him. I don't think it's as strong of a winning chart as Cillian, but I think there's a lot to be excited about here.
Yeah, I think he has the most opportunity for an up-leveling of career of probably any of the nominees as far as actor and actress nominees. And I think he's getting, like you mentioned with Venus right now, he's getting a lot of attention a lot of eyes on him. When did Venus start aspecting?
When did
Was that
Pluto?
recent?
His transiting Pluto is conjunct his Venus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that started last spring and summer. That is a transit that I've seen with being a tipping point for other winners of Grammys, Academy Awards. And Uranus is really shaking up his chart. It's saying it's time for a change. I think we could see him, moving into new areas of the entertainment industry. We are at the close of our show. And there were so many more charts that we didn't get to look at, like Robert Downey Jr., for example, who has some incredible things. Billie Eilish and Diane Warren, who have some really interesting things happening. And so we could talk all day about the astrology of this night and this time. But in your expert opinion, as an entertainment attorney, as a fan of movies and film, let's just do a really quick, let's fire off your predictions for the winners. Let's start with Best Supporting Actor.
Best Supporting Actor goes to, we didn't even talk about these guys. Robert Downey Jr. has been cleaning it up. I would love to see a little sleeper come through, maybe like Mark Ruffalo, maybe
Yes.
Ryan Gosling. So I don't think it's a slam dunk for Robert Downey Jr., but I don't know. So far, it has been. What about you?
Well, I'll say that his sun is right at 14 degrees Aries, and his Venus is right there. He's got a lot of Aries in his chart. And he's also got some interesting things happening with Jupiter transits. And in particular, he's in the year of his Jupiter return. I think he could take it away. So Best Supporting Actress.
Best Supporting Actress goes to America Ferrera.
All right. Good. Actor in a leading role.
Actor in a leading role, Cillian Murphy.
Okay. Actress in a leading role.
That is going to go to, drumroll, Lily Gladstone.
All right.
Oh, wait, no, wait. After, you know what? I thought that going into tonight, but now after seeing the astrology, I think Emma Stone's actually going to pull it out.
Okay. All right.
So we'll see if art imitates astrology or not.
All right.
They both had great charts, so.
They did. I know. They both did.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how about Best Director?
Best Director, that's a slam dunk, Chris Nolan.
Okay. And Best Picture?
Slam dunk, Oppenheimer.
All right. There we go. You heard it here first. Tisha, where can people find you?
TishaMorris.com.
All right.
Is the best. That's where everything is.
Great. And thank you so much for being my very first guest and for talking about the Academy Awards. And thank you all for watching and have a good night. Now we come to a segment of the show that is your cosmic call to action. Anyone who is walking on a spiritual path knows that it's two parts. One part, developing the deep, rich, interior aspect of your spiritual self and your psyche. That is an inner process. And then there is an outer process, a process that is externalized, where we take the wisdom that we've learned and accumulated, we take the passion that we have for making the world a better place, and we take it out into a practice into our everyday lives. So that our activism becomes a spiritual practice. Our volunteer work becomes a spiritual practice. Even just something as simple as saying hello to your neighbor when you're on a walk, that can be an act of great spiritual service. For this week's Cosmic Call to Action, I have my eye on Mercury moving toward Neptune in Pisces. Mercury is conjunct Neptune, and the Sun and Saturn are both in Pisces. And so we have a real opportunity to offer healing, to touch someone's heart through our words. So when was the last time you sent a handwritten note to someone you care about? And that's your call to action this week. Take some time, get out a pen and a paper or some drawing utensils. You can be creative with this and hand write something, a letter of appreciation, of gratitude to someone you care about. Or it could be someone that you're thankful for, or maybe even one of your elected representatives who you think is doing a really good job. Take the time to write that letter, send it out, put a stamp on it. We appreciate our postal service and see what happens. You might feel a shift inside, and undoubtedly the person opening that letter is going to feel a shift as well. Share your experiences. Come to therachellengshow.com. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining our show today. If you would like to hear the unedited, uncut version of today's show, go to therachellengshow.com. There you can find out more about how to join our member-only community. We have a couple of different levels, and you can hear even more good, juicy details about what we were talking about and even catch the charts of some of those Academy Award nominees.